The storm hadn't broken yet, but it would. Clay Moran could feel it coiled in the air, tight, electric, waiting. He stood on the ranger station's sagging porch, thermos in hand, staring out a world that looked half forgotten. Pines loomed like sentinels, their tops wreathed in clouds. Snow clung to the ridgelines, stubborn in the shadows where the sun hadn't touched since November. He hadn't meant to come back here. Not really. But when the seasonal post opened, 5 months of remote patrols, one-man shifts, no tourists, he hadn't thought twice. Solitude felt cleaner than sympathy. At least out here, the silence didn't ask questions. Inside the cabin, the radio crackled with static. Forecasts, worsening winds, dropping temps, chance of whiteout. He should have been worried. He wasn't. He sipped lukewarm coffee, bitter on his tongue, and watched the treetops shift like uneasy sleepers. Then he saw her. At first, she was only movement, a flash of pale motion between dark trunks, low to the ground. He narrowed his eyes. Coyote, maybe, or wolf. But then she stepped from the trees, and the breath hitched in his throat. A Mustang. Wild. Young, but not a foe. Her coat was a striking silver gray, dappled like melting frost, and her mane whipped in the wind like black fire. She didn't bolt, didn't graze. She looked at him, looked, and he forgot to breathe. She stood 30 yards out, half hidden behind a fallen spruce. Her flanks trembled, but not from cold. She was alert, strung tight. Her nostrils flared, eyes locked on his. He didn't move. The Mustang shifted, took 1 step backward, then pivoted and ran. Clay blinked. Gone. Just like that. He told himself to let it go. Wild horses weren't unheard of up here, especially not this close to protected range. Maybe she'd been separated from her herd. Maybe she was spooked by the storm. No reason to follow. But he didn't go inside. Instead, he found himself walking down the slope, boot prints vanishing behind him in soft snow. The air felt heavier now, charged. The wind picked up, whispering to the pines like a warning. He reached the edge of the tree line. Nothing, just branches, drifts, the muted hush of wilderness. He scanned the ground. Hoof prints, fresh, pointed downhill, deeper into the forest. He should have turned back. Should have radioed the station in Weller's Pass to report the sighting and moved on. But something in the horse's stare stayed with him. That stillness, that strange, deliberate pause before she ran. He followed. The trail curved hard, down into a narrow ravine littered with stone and frozen runoff. The Mustang's prints were sharp, unhurried. She wasn't fleeing. She was leading. Branches snapped overhead. Wind howled. A pine cracked in the distance. The sky darkened. Snow began to fall, not heavily, but persistent, a whisper of what was coming. He caught sight of her again, a flicker of silver across the ravine. She paused at the edge of a rise, turning back, watching. "You're not running," Clay muttered. He pressed on. His breath came shorter now, not from exertion, but from something deeper, a knot tightening in his chest. Old and familiar. It had started in the fire, when the world cracked and his family vanished in smoke and ash, and had never really let go. Up ahead, the terrain shifted. The forest thinned, revealing a slope half swallowed by rock and ice. A trail long forgotten. Clay knew this place. Years ago, before the slide, it had led to a lookout point, nothing special. Just an old ranger checkpoint with a battered bench and a view of the valley. No reason for a horse to come this way. He hesitated at the base of the incline. The hoof prints were still clear. Upward, into the broken pass. His radio squawked behind him. Barely a blip of static before silence returned. "Damn it," he muttered. Another gust. Snow now came in slanted waves, biting into his face. The Mustang crested the ridge above. Her coat shimmered through the storm. She turned once more. Eyes found his again. And this time, Clay felt in his gut a pull, low and cold. Not instinct, not curiosity. Something else. He started to climb. The slope fought him. Ice slicked the rocks, and the wind cut hard through his jacket. Twice he slipped. The second time, his knee slammed into stone. He hissed in pain, but didn't stop. Every few feet, he saw new prints, spaced evenly, purposeful. By the time he reached the top, sweat slicked his back despite the cold. He straightened slowly, muscles aching, heart thudding his ears. The Mustang stood still, her breath steaming into the wind. Behind her, just barely visible through twisted pine trunks and broken shale, was a narrow crevice, almost invisible if not for the darkness that bled from it like ink. A cave. Clay stared. The horse turned her head, gaze sliding from the cave back to him, as if waiting, as if daring him to look. The storm roared overhead, and Clay took one step forward. The cave mouth was narrow, almost hidden behind the natural lean of two old firs. Clay wouldn't have seen it if not for the Mustang standing guard like some silent sentinel, hooves planted, breath fogging in the cold. The wind howled past them both now, more wolf than weather, but she didn't flinch, just waited. He crouched low and stepped inside. The air changed instantly, still and close, smelling of damp earth, old stone, and something else that raised the hair on his arms. Not rot, not death, just wrong. The beam of his flashlight cut a thin line ahead, casting shadows that jittered and vanished across the jagged walls. He moved forward, boots crunching softly over scattered gravel and brittle twigs. His fingers flexed near the radio clipped to his shoulder, but he didn't raise it. Words felt too loud here. 10 feet in, the smell deepened. Rust, mold, something acrid buried beneath. His light passed over a scrap of fabric. A child jacket, blue, frayed at the sleeves. He stopped. Beside it, a battered thermos, a broken crayon, a small, pale sneaker. Then, tucked behind a jet of stone, a shape. His breath snagged in his throat. It was a boy, maybe 12, lying on his side, one hand curled near his mouth like he'd fallen asleep. His lips were parted slightly, skin too still, too quiet. Clay dropped to his knees, reached out, cold, no pulse. He bowed his head, jaw clenched so hard it trembled. For a moment, the cave pressing around him, and all he could hear was his own heartbeat, a rustle behind him. He turned. Another child, half curled beneath a filthy blanket, just out of sight. A girl this time. Thin, small, maybe 9. Her eyes fluttered, then opened. They were green, muddied, unfocused. She blinked once, slow and aching, as if waking from something far deeper than sleep. Clay leaned in. Hey, it's all right. You're safe. She didn't speak, didn't move, but her eyes tracked him. Her lips trembled, as if the words had been stripped away long before he arrived. He slid his jacket from his shoulders and wrapped her in it, pulling her gently into his arms. She didn't resist, just sagged into his chest, hollow with exhaustion. We're getting out of here, he murmured. I've got you. He reached for the radio. Static flared, then cracked. Moran to base. Emergency evac needed. Coordinates incoming. Child found, alive. 1 deceased. Repeat. 1 alive, 1. The word stuck, brittle and sharp in his mouth. The girl flinched at the sound. Clay lowered the volume, voice softer now. Hang tight, sweetheart. Help's coming. He looked toward the cave's entrance. The storm hadn't eased. Snow flurried past crack in the wall like white ash. They couldn't move yet. Not like this. He shifted to sit against the stone, keeping the girl close for warmth. She weighed almost nothing. Her fingers twitched against his chest, barely touching. What's your name? He asked. Nothing. He tried again, slower. I'm Clay. I'm a forest ranger. You're safe now. Still nothing, but her breathing steadied. She closed her eyes again. He glanced back at the boy. A stab of helplessness twisted through him. Not fast enough. Not soon enough. Outside, the Mustang paced. He could hear the soft scrape of hooves against stone, the occasional exhale like a sigh of wind. She hadn't left, hadn't wandered, just circled, watched. He thought about the trail. How deliberate it had been. Every turn, every pause, that strange knowing in her eyes. She had brought him here. Clay's gaze returned to the girl. Her face had relaxed in sleep, though her arms still curled protectively to her chest. One wrist bore a faint ring. Skin rubbed raw, healed over in a too neat scar. Rope? He didn't ask more. Didn't want her to go where the memories lived just yet. He pulled the blanket closer around her, adjusted his body to shield her from the draft seeping in. Then, quietly, he reached into his pack. A small wooden carving, his daughter's, a bear smoothed by time. He'd kept it with him every patrol, every shift. A piece of her. Of before. He placed it gently beside the girl's hand. "My little girl likes stories," he said softly. "You used to tell me bears could keep nightmares away. Maybe he'll help you too." She didn't open her eyes, but her fingers crept toward the carving. Held it. Clay swallowed the knot in his throat. Time passed, measured in breath and falling snow. He lost count of the minutes. Then, her voice. Small, dry. "Lily." He looked down. "What?" "My name, it's Lily." It was barely more than air, but it broke something open inside him. He nodded. "Hi, Lily." The flashlight dimmed, flickered once. He tightened his grip around her. Outside, the wind began to wail again. He would keep her warm. He would keep her safe. He had followed a ghost into the woods. But now, holding this fragile life against the cold, he understood. The Mustang had brought him to something still alive. By dawn, the cave had grown colder. Clay could see his breath now, coiling faintly above Lily's face. She hadn't stirred since whispering her name hours earlier, though the wooden bear still lay gripped tight in her hand. Outside, the wind had quieted, replaced by the muffled hush of heavy snowfall. The storm had passed, but had left a world buried in white. Clay shifted his weight carefully, easing Lily upright in his arms. Her body sagged against his chest, limp but warm. He braced her head gently beneath his chin and stepped toward the entrance. Light filtered weakly through the trees beyond, casting a pale blue tint over the snow. The Mustang was still there. She stood just beyond the mouth of the cave, framed against the morning like something painted from memory. Her breath came slow and even, her hooves half sunk in the snowdrift. When she saw Clay step out, she turned and began to walk. No gallop, no wild startle. Just a slow, steady pace down the incline. Clay followed. Each step down the slope was a negotiation. His boots sank deep, his arms burning with Lily's weight. The ice underneath made the footing treacherous, and more than once he paused, breath ragged, scanning for the next safe foothold. But the horse stayed just ahead, guiding without pause. They reached a ridge and began to descend. Midway down, his boots slid on a hidden patch of ice. His knees buckled. He twisted, tucking Lily tight against him, and slammed into the snow hard. A jolt of pain flared in his shoulder. He lay still a moment, groaning softly, pulse hammering in his throat. Lily whimpered. "I've got you," he whispered, checking her face. "You're okay." He sat up slowly. His shoulder throbbed, but nothing broken. He adjusted Lily in his arms and looked up the trail. The Mustang had stopped. She stood a dozen yards ahead, ears alert, tail flicking gently. When Clay began to move again, she turned and continued on. They trudged through dense forest and narrow ravines, the trail familiar now. He was nearing the West Perimeter Road, the closest route for rescue. His radio buzzed faintly at intervals, but signal remained patchy. Around midday, he caught his first glimpse of the ridge tower. The forest opened into a clearing, and beyond it rose a signal structure, a steel skeleton jutting into the sky. Relief gripped his chest. Then, from behind him, a voice crackled through the radio. "Ranger Moran, do you copy? We're tracking your beacon. Chopper en route." Clay fumbled for mic. "This is Moran. I have a child. Female, approximate age 9. Hypothermic but responsive. One deceased miner in cave. Repeat, one deceased. Coordinates pinging now." "Roger that, Moran. Medical inbound in under 15. Hold position." Clay crouched beside a fallen log and settled Lily gently into snow-cradled space, wrapping his jacket tighter around her. She blinked up at him slowly, eyes glassy. "Almost there, Lily. You're doing good." She didn't speak, but her fingers found the wooden bear again. Her lips moved, just a whisper. Clay leaned in. "My brother," she said not to be scared. He said help would come. Clay felt his chest twist. He was right. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. The thump of helicopter blades came faint at first, then louder, until snow scattered in swirling gusts above the trees. The bird crested the ridge and descended slowly toward the clearing, its skids crunching into the drift. Medic spilled out. Red Parka's gear packs practiced urgency. Clay stepped back as they approached. One knelt beside Lily and began checking vitals. Another pulled out thermal wraps and oxygen. She's stable. The lead medic called over the rotor wash. Good job keeping her warm. Clay didn't answer. He watched as Lily was lifted onto a stretcher, her small form nearly swallowed by layers of thermal foil. She reached out. He stepped forward. She took his hand. "Will you come too?" she asked. He smiled softly. "Not in the bird, but I'll be right behind you." She nodded once, hand slipping free. The medics loaded her into the chopper. One turned to Clay. "We'll file the location you gave for the cave. Team will head there before nightfall." He nodded. "Tell them to bring gloves. The boy, he should be brought out with care." The medic hesitated. "Understood." As the blades began to lift, Clay turned toward the tree lean. The Mustang stood at the edge of the clearing, watching. Her coat gleamed in the shifting light, streaked with frost and streaks of sweat. She didn't come closer. Clay approached her slowly, boots crunching with each step. He stopped a few feet away. "You knew," he said. "Didn't you?" The horse blinked slowly, her gaze unreadable. Then she stepped forward, nose brushing lightly against his outstretched hand. It lasted only a moment. Then she turned, walked back into the trees, and disappeared without sound. Clay watched the place where she vanished, the silence that followed feeling deeper than any he'd known. He looked back at the sky. The chopper vanished beyond the ridge. He stood alone again, but not as before. The days that followed unfolded in slow, deliberate rhythm, like a snowmelt carving its path back into the earth. Clay drove into town more than he had in years. Always the same route, always the same reason. Lily had been transferred to a children's recovery center in Livingston, 2 hours down the mountain. The nurses knew him now, not by name, but by nods, by how gently he opened the door to her room. She always looked up when he entered, always smiled. A small one, shy but sure. She spoke more now. Not much, but enough to stitch pieces of her story together. Her mother was gone, had been for years. Her brother, Thomas, had protected her as long as he could. The man who took them wasn't someone she knew. He had promised food, warmth, and then darkness. A cave, chains, quiet threats, days blurring into weeks. Thomas had died protecting her. She didn't say how. She didn't need to. Clay listened. He didn't try to fix her words, didn't fill the silences. He just sat beside her bed and handed her new sketchbooks each visit. She filled them with Mustangs. Always the same one, silver gray with a dark mane, standing tall beside a cave's mouth. Sometimes Clay appeared in the corner, a shape with a ranger's badge and kind eyes. On one visit, she handed him a page. The Mustang stood on a ridge, looking down at a girl in a field of flowers. She was never scared, Lily said softly. Not really. She just didn't want to go alone. Clay kept that drawing folded in his back pocket. Back at the station, the season shifted. Snow turned to slush, then mud. Pine needles felt like old memories. Clay filed his reports, walked the perimeter trails, and answered the occasional hiker call. The quiet returned, but it no longer pressed on his lungs the way it used to. One morning, he drove back to the cave. The trail had thawed, revealing the scattered marks of earlier chaos. Hoof prints, his own deep boot tracks, places where the snow had caved under weight. The cave itself was sealed now, flagged and marked for investigation. But Clay didn't go to the entrance. He went to the slope nearby, where Thomas had lain. He knelt, brushing aside pine needles and fresh moss. From his pack, he pulled out a carved piece of cedar, small, sanded smooth, shaped into form of a boy sitting cross-legged with arms open. It had taken him nights to finish, his hands clumsy from disuse. He placed it gently against a rock and whispered, "She made it, Thomas. You did that." Wind stirred the trees above, a soft hush like breath through sleeping pines. Clay stood, and walked back down the trail. At the bottom, he stopped. The Mustang was there, exactly where she'd been that first day, between tree and snow, head high, body still as stone. He blinked. For a moment, he thought she might vanish again, but she didn't. She stepped forward, slowly. Clay remained still. She came to him this time, close enough he could see the light dancing in her eyes, the faint white mark across her left cheek, like a brushstroke of moon. He reached out. His fingers found her muzzle, warm and soft beneath the spring air. "You're not just wild," he murmured. "You're something else." She didn't flinch, didn't run. That evening, Clay returned to the station and sat with his boots off, bare feet against old floorboards. He stared at the photos still framed above the desk, his wife, his daughter, their smiles frozen in sunlight. He no longer cried when he saw it, but he didn't look away either. A week later, Lily's case hit the news. Authorities found a man, arrested without incident, in a trailer outside Helena. Inside, they found evidence, journals, maps, a list of places. He hadn't just planned it. He'd done it before. The boy's body was laid to rest beside his mother's, in a county plot marked by a smooth stone and wildflowers someone planted anonymously. Clay attended, stood in the back. Lily held his hand the whole time. Later, she looked up at him. "You didn't have to come." "I did," he said. "You're not alone." Months passed. One late afternoon, Clay watched as Lily stood at the edge of the Ranger meadow, wind in her hair. She laughed, free, open, as the Mustang came trotting up the hill. They watched each other. No ropes, no reins, just a shared breath. The mare dipped her head and nudged Lily's shoulder. The girl giggled and brushed her hand along the horse's neck, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Clay stood a few feet back, arms crossed, watching them. The wind picked up. Lily turned. "She's staying, right?" Clay nodded. "If she wants to." The sun dipped behind the ridge, casting gold across the trees. And for the first time in years, Clay felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Not everything broken stays lost. Some things, some souls, find their way home.